Alright everyone, it is time for the Occult, video number 357. We're going to talk a little bit about fake cryptids, because of course some of them, they were never meant to be realistic to begin with, and there's an interesting little bit of folklore here. Actually, the evolution of some of these characters, like the Jackalope and the Wampus cat, there are a million others, and the Hodrag, I think it's called, and they're called fearsome critters, actually, in 19th century parlance. And again, their usage over time morphed from campfire tales to, I think, a little bit more than that. First, I'd like to say there's nothing creepy about the occult, so fucking buy my books. Just a little bit of a shout out there. Anyway, we'll talk about a few of these. First, you've got the Hoopsnake. Now, again, these are all subject to the topic of fearsome critters. You can look that up online. There's a whole laundry list of them. The Hoopsnake was rumored to come downhill at people and effectively lunge at their faces. It would curl itself into a circle. This is one of my favorite fake cryptids because it's basically an Ouroboros knockoff. And it would grab its own tail and it would, you know, basically wheel on down the hill, gaining momentum, and then it would attack you in that manner. It was never actually meant to be taken seriously by the people that developed this story. Same as the Jackalope, which continued to actually be in certain tabloids well into the modern era. I remember the Weekly World News back when I think it's defunct now. They had bits on the Jackalope and the Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is a little bit different. It's not the fearsome critter side of things, but it is still obviously a fake cryptid. I'll get into what I think people are actually seeing because some people take sightings seriously. There's the Wampus cat, puma-like in nature, and various others. Again, there are dozens and dozens of creatures subjugate to this basic folkloric subtopic. Now, the original folkloric origin of these were as effectively like lumberjack stories, campfire stories that would be told by people in the rugged wilderness in the middle of the United States. Basically, when these things emerged, we're talking about the 19th century. Most of the country is effectively uninhabited. There are a handful of outposts, the occasional village. That's basically all there was between the Pacific and Atlantic coasts. Basically, the eastern side of the United States, there was some agriculture and shit going on. Farms were proliferating and orchards and stuff. You had cities. You had Boston and New York and a few of these other places, Philadelphia. But between that, not even as far as the Mississippi River and the West Coast, San Francisco, etc., you had this vast expanse of plains, you had swamps, you had mountains, and there wasn't a whole lot going on there. And what happened was that people would go into this wilderness to trap, to gain lumber and so forth, and to make their fortune, homestead, to start establishing civilization, farms, etc., or just to be effectively nothing more than hunter-gatherers, a lot of hermits and so forth. And they need a form of entertainment. They don't have TV or radio or anything. They would get together, including total strangers that met up while they were trapping and shit, with their baked beans and fresh caught fish around the campfire, and they would tell tall tales because, you know, you needed to do something for entertainment. Later on, what appears to have happened, we're talking some decades later on, so civilization is beginning to encroach in these areas. You get the Homestead Act. All of a sudden you have small railroad towns and vast expanses of farms around them. The plains are settled. You start getting some more settlements in the Rocky Mountain area. The Californian settlements begin to expand eastward away from just the coast because, of course, that was the big thing. San Francisco and LA and so forth are established, and now they're beginning to form farms and so forth in the Napa Valley. And what happens is that a bunch of people from the urban east begin to migrate into these areas. You have investors that want to go there and invest in land. They want to buy up properties, set up apartments, etc. in some of these towns. You have people from the east that are dispossessed of any land, but they've got reasonable wealth, so they say, you know, fuck it, I'm going on the Oregon Trail. This is before Homestead, of course. I'm going to go westward ho. I'm going to be rugged and start a farm that may or may not completely collapse. You have people related to industry. Of course, you get the extraction of coal, etc., the rail lines and other shipping, the Pony Express, and so people are filtering into these areas. Now, you have all sorts of bizarre, fantastic creatures you don't have back east. Eastern dwellers and people on the furthest west coast, they understand what a black bear is, but they've never seen a grizzly bear. All of a sudden they're aware that the bears that are already rather large and potentially dangerous, although rarely so, less aggressive, black bears by the way, All of a sudden they realize that they have cousins that are 3 times the size. They realize that buffaloes do actually exist. They're seeing them for the first time roaming around the plains before most of them were butchered, and these days most of them are hybrids. They're not purebred stock at all. They realize they're prairie dogs. They're these little funny creatures that live in little mounds in the ground and have a communal lifestyle, and they're sort of adorable and make funny noises and look out for each other, sort of like, creatures in Australia or something. And by the way, that continent barely explored. The kangaroo, initially considered to be a cryptid. When it was first announced that it existed, people said it was crazy. Oh, a semi-bipedal creature hops around. It carries his baby in a pouch. That makes a whole lot of sense. It sounds like shenanigans to me. And then, of course, they caught several specimens, stuffed them, and brought them back to England, and then the rest was history. Coelacanth, following the same trajectory. They realized that there were all of these bizarre creatures out west. Easterners were therefore, Easterners in the sense of, they're from New York or something. They were gullible. They didn't understand a whole lot about the terrain, the climate, the geology, the creatures, the lifestyle, or anything about what happened in the plains, the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest. They knew nothing about it. To them, it's basically part of a fictional tale. It's something they'd read in a book. It was therefore fairly easy to convince them, yeah, indeed, out here there are rabbits, but they've got horns. Well, horns are natural. They know what a deer is. Rabbits are natural. They infest your garden every single day. Old Victorian gardens of the eastern regions. Well, it's a small act to combine the two and to make the jackalope. The hoopsnake makes sense. Well, you've seen pictures of the Ouroboros probably, and maybe you've studied Yggdrasil and some of these other things. The world snake around the world tree in Norse mythology, that was becoming more popular because actually a bunch of Swedes and Norwegians were moving into the Dakotas, Minnesota, etc. under the Homestead Act. So people from the east, they're from an urban area. Mostly they're seeing squirrels, raccoons. Occasionally they might come across a black bear or a bobcat or something. It's not so rugged anymore. The eastern, especially northeastern part of the United States has been settled. They're moving out west. They're wealthy. And all of these uncouth hermit people, these trappers and loggers and so forth, with their bedraggled fur clothes and so forth, say, hey, I bet this dude in a top hat doesn't know his ass from his head. You know those campfire stories we've been telling? I bet he'll take it fucking seriously. And indeed, in some cases, these made it into official reports, government reports, collecting, pseudo-folklore effectively. In some cases, these people went on wild hunts for these creatures. The Crater Lake has a monster in it. Yeah, I know you've heard of Champ or Loch Ness or whatever. No, this one's actually real. Out here, anything is possible because there's like 2 people per square mile. It's not the same as New York City now, is it? And so if you look through the evolution of the fearsome critters sort of thing, initially it's understood to be fiction, and basically it's just, some drunk dudes with their baked beans around the campfire having a guffaw. 20, 30 years later, it's related to people who are outsiders as a sort of insider joke. It's sort of not just folkloric but anthropological at that point, and it's related to them as though it's real. And up until basically the present day, some of these stories actually circulate. Nobody actually believes in the hoopsnake or the Wampus cat, but some of them believe in Bigfoot. What about the Chupacabra? These sightings start in Puerto Rico, technically speaking. What you're actually dealing with are animals with sarcoptic mange, by and large, or feral animals that are, again, bedraggled and diseased in some way. But there are people who actually take it seriously. They believe that their sheep at night get vampirized by some strange alien-like creature. Every picture that you've got of it appears to be a coyote or some similar animal with mange. By the way, if you want to see some problems with cryptozoological research, and some cryptids I do believe in one form or another, take a look at a bear with mange sometime. You can probably find a video of it on YouTube or elsewhere. It doesn't look like a bear now, does it? It looks totally different. Imagine you shave a cat bald. It doesn't look so chubby anymore. This cat would look rather goofy without any hair. Mange causes the hair to fall out. There's your Chupacabra, essentially. You're dealing with a puma or a coyote or something that's hairless and fucked up because of mites burrowing into their hair follicles. Effectively, it's not a pretty sight. So yeah, a little bit about fake cryptids. It's more of a folkloric than occult topic, but there is a little bit of a cautionary tale, and I'm going to be releasing a booklet fairly soon called Erroneous Occultism, and cryptids do feature in this, along with alchemy and some of these other subtopics within the supernatural and paranormal. Keep in mind that just because something is related, even by sources that would be considered academic in nature, of course some of the tales about cryptids, they definitely were, does not necessarily mean that it's true. In some cases it's mistaken identity. In some cases you have some young rogue anthropologists. They go out into the Atlas Mountains and start talking about the dwarves that live there. By the way, I've actually edited a booklet on this topic. The dwarves of Mount Atlas, very intriguing anthropological study, claiming that there's a race of pygmies, effectively, in that particular region that apparently in some context did exist, appears to be defunct now, and it's taken very seriously. Technically cryptozoological in nature, although it deals with humanoid life forms, relates them as being effectively hominid-like in nature. Very, very intriguing subject. That's about all. Peace out.